she said. "If you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best." So I handed her an invoice for the damages, and 48 hours later, her lawyer tried to bargain that I always thought I was the kind of guy who could handle things. Handle pressure at work, handle bills stacking up, handle family drama, and, yes, handle my girlfriend's temper. Her name was Melissa, and when we first met, that temper was disguised as passion. She was fiery, quick-witted, the kind of woman who never let anyone walk over her. The first time we argued, back when we were just dating casually, she raised her voice, called me stubborn, then laughed it off 5 minutes later with a kiss and a joke about how fighting keeps things exciting. Back then, I thought it was charming. I told myself it meant she cared deeply, that her emotions were just intense because she loved intensely. I ignored the little voice in my head that whispered, "This could get worse." It did. At first, the outbursts were rare. She'd get angry if plans changed last minute, or if she felt ignored in a conversation. But over time, those small sparks became fires. One night, she threw her phone across the room because I didn't answer a text fast enough while I was in a meeting. Another time, she smashed a plate against the sink because the pasta sauce came out too salty. I swept up the pieces, told myself everyone had flaws, and tried to smooth things over. I kept making excuses. She's stressed from work. She's tired. She didn't mean it. It's not that bad. But there's only so long you can tell yourself a lie before it crumbles under its own weight. The night it all broke, we had been arguing about something small. Bills, I think. I had asked her why she forgot to pay the utility bill that month, and instead of admitting she'd slipped, she snapped at me, accusing me of micromanaging her and treating her like a child. The volume rose quickly. My neighbors probably heard. I tried to stay calm, but calm only seemed to fuel her fury more. Then it happened. She slammed her fist into the coffee table, knocking over a stack of books. She grabbed the nearest lamp and hurled it at the wall, where it shattered into a mess of ceramic and wires. My apartment, the place I worked hard to keep tidy, the space that felt like my sanctuary, was suddenly a war zone. She stormed into the kitchen, yanking cabinet doors so hard one cracked at the hinge. A glass hit the tile floor, exploding into sharp fragments that scattered under the fridge. I stood frozen, staring at the chaos as if I'd stepped into someone else's life. This wasn't a passionate girlfriend. This was destruction. And then, in the middle of the wreckage, she turned to me with wild eyes, hair sticking to her damp face from the heat of her rage, and said the words she clearly thought justified it all. "If you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best." She said it with pride, like it was some kind of mic drop, as if she'd just declared an undeniable truth that would silence any argument I could make. Normally, this is the point where I would have backed down. I would have said something like, "You're right, I love you. Let's just calm down." I would have cleaned up the broken glass myself, hugged her when she started crying after the adrenaline wore off, and told myself it wasn't that serious. But that night, something shifted in me. Maybe it was the sound of glass crunching under my shoes as I stepped forward. Maybe it was the broken lamp on the floor, a gift from my late grandmother that I realized could never be replaced. Maybe it was just the sheer exhaustion of carrying the weight of someone else's chaos for so long. Whatever it was, I didn't play my usual role. I looked at her, dead calm, and said, "You're right." Her face flickered with confusion for a second, as though she hadn't expected me to agree. She opened her mouth to argue, but I didn't give her the chance. I walked past her, into my office, and shut the door. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about how to soothe her. I wasn't thinking about how to fix us. I wasn't even angry. I was calculating. I pulled out my laptop, opened a blank invoice template, and began typing. Lamp, $120. Damaged books, $200. Coffee table, $600. Cabinet door replacement, $350. Cleaning service for debris, $180. Miscellaneous damages, $45. Line after line, I filled in the costs, my fingers steady on the keys. Each item I listed felt like proof, not just of her destruction, but of the years I had allowed myself to believe this was normal, that this was love. By the time I finished, I sat back and stared at the total, $1,495. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of control. Not over her. She was a storm I could never control, but over myself. Over my response. Over the way, I would no longer let her spin the story that I was weak for not tolerating her worst. The next morning, when she came back, calmer, wearing her guilty, I went too far, but you'll forgive me smile. I didn't greet her with open arms. I handed her the envelope with the invoice inside. The moment she saw the envelope, Melissa squinted at it like it was some kind of prank. She tore it open with that same careless aggression she seemed to carry into every corner of life. Her eyes scanned the paper, and then she froze. Her lips parted. She looked up at me, blinking rapidly. "What the hell is this?" she asked, her voice wobbling between incredulity and simmering anger. "It's an invoice," I said simply, sipping my coffee as if we were having the most mundane conversation in the world. "For what?" she demanded, her eyes darting back to the paper. "For the damages," I replied, nodding toward the living room where shards of glass still glittered under the morning sun. I hadn't touched anything. I wanted her to see the wreckage in daylight. The broken lamp, the cracked cabinet, the ruined table, the home she turned into rubble in her rage. She laughed, but it was sharp and hollow. "You can't be serious. You're actually charging me? Like I'm some tenant who broke the security deposit." "Yes," I said evenly. "That's exactly what I'm doing." She set the paper down on the counter, folded her arms, and tilted her head, trying to regain the upper hand. "You're out of your mind. This is petty. Relationships aren't about keeping score." I leaned forward. "You're right. They're not. They're about respect. And destroying my property isn't respect. So this invoice is just a reminder that actions have costs." For once, she didn't have an immediate comeback. Her eyes flicked back to the total at the bottom, $1,495. I could see the math happening in her head. Rent was due in a week. Her credit card bills were piling up. She didn't have that kind of money to casually hand over. "This is insane," she muttered, her voice softer now, laced with disbelief. "You're supposed to love me. You're supposed to support me. Not." She waved the paper in the air. "Treat me like a criminal." I stayed calm. That was the part that rattled her the most, I think. Normally by now I'd be raising my voice, arguing, apologizing, trying to pull us back from the edge. But I just sat there, sipping my coffee, steady as a rock. "You're not a criminal," I said, "but you acted recklessly. And recklessness comes with consequences. I'm done pretending it doesn't." Her jaw clenched, and then, right on cue, the tears started. Not the kind born of genuine regret, but the kind that always came when she realized anger wasn't working. "You're supposed to love all of me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Even my flaws. You promised." "I never promised to finance destruction," I replied. She stared at me like I had just slapped her. Then, with a sudden shift, the tears dried, and her face hardened. "You know what? Fine. Send your stupid little invoice. See who cares. No judge in the world will side with you. You'll look like a lunatic." She stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. I thought maybe that was the end of it, that she'd calm down, maybe even apologize, or at least sweep up the glass. But I underestimated her pride. 2 days later, I received an email from a law office. At first, I thought it was spam. Then I read the subject line, Property Damage Dispute, Client, Melissa Carter. I opened it. Her lawyer, or maybe just some cheap attorney she'd found online, accused me of emotional harassment and financial intimidation. He claimed the invoice was an unreasonable tactic designed to shame and control his client. I almost laughed. I reread the email twice, partly in disbelief, partly in admiration of her audacity. She had actually turned the tables and tried to make me the villain. But here's the thing, I don't bluff. I wrote back, attaching photos of the damages. The broken lamp, the shattered glass, the cracked cabinet hinge, the dented table. I itemized everything again, this time with receipts and repair estimates from local shops. Then I added one more note. "If this matter cannot be resolved privately, I am fully prepared to pursue small claims court for reimbursement." I hit send. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was Melissa. "You're really doing this?" She spat the moment I answered. "You're actually dragging strangers into our relationship? Do you realize how pathetic this looks?" "No," I said calmly. "What's pathetic is smashing up someone's home and then thinking there won't be consequences. You brought in a lawyer." "I'm just responding." "You're such a loser," she hissed. "No real man would nickel and dime his girlfriend like this. No real partner would destroy someone's belongings," I replied. So I guess we're both learning new definitions. The silence on the other end was heavy. Then she hung up. For the next 48 hours, I didn't hear from her. I half expected an apology, half expected more legal threats. What I didn't expect was her lawyer calling me directly. He sounded tired, like he'd been dragged into a mess he didn't want. Listen, he said, sighing into the receiver. My client is emotional. She may have overreacted in contacting me. Is there a number you'd be willing to settle at that avoids court? I almost smiled. There it was. The crack in her armor. I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, the number's already on the invoice. $1,495. I'm not lowering it. She pays it, or we take it to court. The lawyer sighed again, clearly annoyed at being caught in the middle of something so petty and yet so destructive. I'll speak to her, he muttered. When I hung up, I sat back in my chair, feeling something I hadn't in months: peace. It wasn't about the money anymore. It wasn't about the lamp or the books or the cabinet. It was about finally refusing to be her punching bag, literally or emotionally. For once, I wasn't the one bending, apologizing, or patching things up. I was holding her accountable. And judging by the phone call I'd just had, accountability was something she'd never expected to face. That update 1.it didn't take long for the fallout to begin. 2 days after the lawyer's call, I received a long, rambling text from Melissa. The first half of it was an apology, or at least her version of one. She wrote about being stressed, about how she just snapped, and how my invoice made her feel betrayed. The second half, however, was pure manipulation. She sprinkled in lines like, "We're supposed to be partners, not enemies. My friends think you're being extreme. What will your family think if they find out you're suing your own wife?" She wasn't my wife, not legally, anyway, but I knew what she was doing. She was trying to shift the battlefield from money and damages to social pressure. She wanted me to feel embarrassed, cornered, guilty. It didn't work. I screenshotted her text and filed it away. Then I went about my day. That night, however, things escalated again. Melissa's best friend, Kayla, called me. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity won. "You can't be serious." Kayla started without so much as a hello. "You're really threatening to take her to court over some broken furniture?" "It's not just some broken furniture," I replied calmly. "It's my home, and she wrecked it." Kayla scoffed. She was upset. "People make mistakes. You're really going to humiliate her like this?" I almost laughed. Humiliation isn't me asking her to pay for the damages. Humiliation is her destroying my place and thinking she gets a free pass. There was silence on the other end, then a huff. "You know what? You've changed. You used to be so patient. No wonder she lost it on you." And just like that, the call ended. I expected the smear campaign after that. Melissa always had a talent for painting herself as the victim. Sure enough, within hours, I started noticing subtle digs on her Instagram stories. Black background posts with vague quotes like, "Some men don't know how to handle a real woman. If you can't love me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best." Funny how people change when you stop catering to their ego. Each one got dozens of likes, and "you go girl" comments from her friends. But here's the thing. When you put your life online, you can't control the narrative forever. Because while she was posting self-pitying quotes, I was quietly talking to her landlord. See, Melissa technically wasn't on the lease. She'd been staying with me. She never put her name on a single utility bill. She'd bragged before about how free she felt not having those responsibilities. That freedom meant that when she trashed the apartment, she didn't just damage my property, she violated my rental agreement. And landlords don't like tenants who cost them money. When I showed my landlord the photos, along with the lawyer's email and Melissa's texts, his patience evaporated. He made it clear, either she paid for the damages or eviction proceedings would start. And since I had already been looking into other living arrangements, I told him I wouldn't be the one fighting to keep her here. 2 nights later, Melissa stormed into the apartment in tears. "They're kicking me out," she shouted, throwing her bag down. "No," I corrected. "They're kicking us out. But I've already found somewhere new." Her face went pale. "You're leaving me?" "I'm protecting myself," I said simply. For a second, I thought she might break down completely. But then her pride snapped back into place. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Acting all calm and logical. But you're going to regret this. No one's going to want a bitter, petty man who drags women to court over a lamp." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because the next day, I got a call from her lawyer again. Only this time, his tone was very different. Mr. Daniels, he began, his voice almost apologetic. It seems my client has reconsidered her position. She's prepared to settle this matter privately. Would you accept partial payment as a good faith gesture to close this case? I let out a slow breath. Partial payment. Yes, she's offering $500. I nearly laughed out loud. The invoice is $1,495. She pays in full, or we go to court. My evidence is solid, and frankly, I think she knows she'd lose. There was a pause. Then the lawyer sighed. I'll speak with her again. Click. That night, Melissa blew up my phone. Text after text, voicemail after voicemail. Accusations, pleading, anger, guilt-tripping. She cycled through every trick in the book. Finally, one text came through that made me stop and stare. If you do this, I'll tell everyone what kind of man you really are. I'll ruin your reputation. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back one sentence. Reputation is built on truth. And I've got the receipts. I never heard back from her that night. But the next morning, something happened that made everything worth it. I woke up to find screenshots flooding my inbox from mutual friends, coworkers, even one of Melissa's cousins. Screenshots of her Instagram stories, screenshots of her texts, screenshots of the invoice I'd sent, which she herself had posted to mock me. Except now people weren't mocking me. They were mocking her. Turns out, when you broadcast your dirty laundry to the world gets to judge. And in this case, the judgment wasn't in her favor. One comment under her post stuck with me. So let me get this straight. You trashed his apartment, refused to pay, hired a lawyer, and now you're mad he wants accountability? Girl, you're wild. By the end of the day, Melissa deleted the post. But screenshots don't disappear. For the first time, her carefully crafted victim narrative had backfired. And me? I didn't have to say a single word. Final update. After the social media fiasco, things quieted down for about a week. Melissa went silent. No texts, no calls, no vague Instagram quotes. For a moment, I thought maybe she had finally accepted the reality of the situation. But Melissa was never one to bow out gracefully. One evening, just as I was leaving work, I saw her waiting by my car. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, hair a mess, clutching a half-empty coffee like it was her lifeline. We need to talk, she said flatly. I sighed. Melissa, this isn't the place. Please, she interrupted, almost begging. Against my better judgment, I agreed to sit down at a cafe across the street. She didn't waste time. You win, okay? You win. Everyone thinks I'm a monster. My friends barely talk to me anymore. Even Kayla blocked me after I asked her to help cover rent. My landlord says I'm blacklisted from half the complexes in town because of behavioral concerns. Her voice cracked. I didn't think it would go this far. I didn't think you'd actually fight me like this. For a moment, I almost felt sympathy. Almost. But then I remembered the holes in my walls, the broken dishes, the lawyer calls, and the smear campaign she launched against me. You brought this on yourself, I said calmly. Actions have consequences. You didn't just cross a line. You burned the bridge behind you. She stared at me, her eyes glossy. Then, in a whisper, so that's it? You're just done with me. I set my coffee down. Melissa, I was done the moment you decided my apartment was your punching bag. I gave you every chance to own up, to make things right. You doubled down instead. That's not someone I can trust. That's not someone I want in my life. Her composure cracked. But we had plans. We were supposed to move in together, maybe even. She stopped herself, biting her lip. I stood up. We had plans. Past tense. You chose to destroy them. Not me. I left her sitting there, trembling with a mix of anger and regret. That night, I got an email from her lawyer. No threats this time. Just a PDF attachment. Proof of a bank transfer for the full amount of my invoice. Payment in full. Case closed. It should have felt like pure victory. And in a way, it did. But more than anything, it felt like closure. Over the next few weeks, life settled into something better than I expected. I moved into a new apartment, clean, quiet, and mine alone. No broken furniture, no slammed doors, no screaming matches at 2 a.m. Just peace. Word about Melissa continued to trickle in, though. A coworker who followed her on Instagram told me she'd gone private and wiped most of her posts. Someone else mentioned seeing her working at a bar, the same kind of place she used to rack up tabs at on my dime. And one night, Out of sheer curiosity, I peeked at her page through a mutual friend's account. There she was, posting inspirational quotes about self-love and growth, pretending she was on some grand journey of healing. Maybe she was. Maybe she wasn't. It didn't matter. Because while she was still busy curating an image, I was living a reality she couldn't touch. A few months later, I ran into Kayla at a grocery store. At first, she tried to avoid me, but then she walked over, looking sheepish. Hey, she said. I just wanted to say, I was wrong. About everything. Melissa spun the story, and I bought it. But after what happened with the landlord, the lawyer, all of it, yeah. You were right to do what you did. I raised an eyebrow. That's a first. She laughed nervously. Yeah, well, let's just say Melissa doesn't exactly have a support system anymore. People don't trust her. She kind of burned every bridge. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I just nodded and said, I hope she figures things out. Because the truth was, Melissa wasn't my problem anymore. And that was the real win. Not the money, not the lawyer, not even the satisfaction of seeing her reputation implode. The win was freedom. The win was peace. The win was knowing I'd finally drawn a line and held it, no matter how much she tried to push back. Looking back now, I realized Melissa's favorite phrase, if you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best, was always less of a warning and more of a confession. Her worst wasn't a bad day or an off mood. Her worst was who she really was. And her best was just the mask she wore until she didn't feel like keeping it on anymore. I deserved better than that. And now, I finally had it.